What impression did you have of Eleanor and Franklin Roosevelt?
Well, for me, it seemed that it was going to be a better life for a lot of people. He created jobs he called WPA, Workmen's Compensation or something, and everybody would get a job. And he closed the banks, and when they reopened, they were safe so that you wouldn't lose your savings. And for me, that seemed to be the best thing that could happen to our nation.
Your greatest fear during the Depression?
Well, I think one of your greatest fears was losing your home, not having enough to eat, and then they had these places called a soup kitchen, and for me, my greatest fear was that I would have to go and stand in line and ask for that bowl of soup and that piece of bread.
The biggest way the Depression affected you at the time?
Well, for one thing, I moved to Chicago. I came from a small town, and in a small town you didn't realize how poor some of the people were. When I moved to Chicago, I found people digging in the garbage cans for potato peelings, a bone from some meat, and you knew they were going to take it home and cook. So I would take a clean bag, some potatoes, some carrots, wrap up a piece of bread, and put it in a clean bag, so if they came to my garbage can, they would at least get something that wasn't garbage, because that really bothered me to see people that hungry.
What's the biggest way the Depression affected your adult life and probably still affects you now?
Well, you learned to economize. You learned the value of a dollar, because dollars were hard to come by in those days. So it taught you to sew, to cook, to always think ahead for the future so that you weren't going to go hungry. You learned all kinds of things, and to this day, I still sew. I still do a lot of cooking, my own baking. I make all my own vegetables, my fruits and pickles. And if I wouldn't have learned those during the Depression years, I maybe wouldn't do them today. So I think that's what I learned and still live by.
Do you see any connections between economic conditions today and those of the 30s? Are there events which seem to be repeating themselves?
Well, our economic conditions today, for me, I think everything has skyrocketed too much. I don't know, unless it's going to level off, we are bound to have another depression, which I hope will never be as bad as the one of the 29 and 30s. I don't really know how else to answer that question, except that I do think our commodities have got to come down and wages should level off. And maybe that would be the answer. I really don't know. As far as the events of today and of the yesteryear, I still say that unless things change, our interest rate is too high, our land is cost too much, and you know, if the bottom drops out, none of it's going to be worth anything. And that's what caused the other depression. And there, everything went way high, and then all of a sudden there was no money to back nothing up, and so that's why the country went broke. And let's hope it don't happen anymore. That's all I have to say, Joe.